The night I almost lost the job I'd spent 10 years building, I realized I had been the one sabotaging myself the entire time. Not my boss. Not bad luck. Me. I'm 43 years old, and for most of my adult life, I thought of myself as a careful person. Careful with money, careful with relationships, careful with decisions. I planned everything. I checked things twice. My coworkers used to joke that I'd read the fine print on a birthday card. I liked that reputation. It felt safe. I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio. Nothing glamorous, but steady. I had a corner desk near the window, a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest employee," that my niece gave me as a joke, and a routine I never broke. Wake up at 6. Coffee. Emails before anyone else got in. I liked being the first one in the office. It made me feel like I was ahead of something, even if I couldn't say what. Here's the thing I didn't notice for years: every time something good was about to happen to me, I found a way to almost ruin it. A promotion would come up, and I'd suddenly get too busy to prepare for the interview. A relationship would start going somewhere real, and I'd pick a fight over something small, something that didn't matter, until the other person got tired and left. I always had a reason. A logical, defensible reason. I never once thought the reason itself might be the problem. It took a project called Warehouse Optimization 12, I still remember the file number, which tells you something about how deep this thing was carved into me, for me to actually see it. My manager, Denise, had picked me to lead it. It was the biggest project of my career. A new distribution system for 3 regional warehouses, 6 months of planning, a direct line to the VP if it went well. I remember sitting in her office, nodding, saying all the right things. Absolutely. I've got this. And I meant it. I want to be clear about that. I meant it completely. But something strange started happening almost immediately. I'd sit down to build the project timeline, and I'd find myself reorganizing my desk drawers instead. I'd open the planning software, stare at it for 4 minutes, and then go refill my coffee I hadn't finished. Small things. Forgivable things. I told myself I was warming up, that everyone needs a little runway before diving into something big. 3 weeks in, I was behind schedule. Not dramatically. Just behind. A few days here, a missed call there. I remember telling myself it was because the vendor was slow to respond, because Denise kept changing the specs, because my email inbox was a disaster that week. All true, technically. But none of it explained the pit in my stomach every time I opened that project folder. A pit that felt less like stress and more like dread, the kind of feeling you get right before something you don't want to face. I didn't understand that feeling. I just worked around it. Then, about 5 weeks in, something happened that I couldn't explain away so easily. I had a call scheduled with the regional warehouse managers, the most important call of the whole project. I'd prepared for it the night before, gone over every number twice. I set 2 alarms. I even laid out my notes on the kitchen table so I wouldn't forget them. I slept through both alarms. Not because I was exhausted. Not because I'd stayed up too late. I went to bed at 10, same as always. I just didn't wake up. And when I finally did, 40 minutes after the call started, I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my phone, watching the missed calls stack up, and I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Relief. That's the part that scared me. Not the missed call. The relief. For a few seconds, before the panic set in, some part of me was glad it happened. Glad I didn't have to get on that call. Glad the project might slip a little further out of my hands. I remember sitting there thinking, what kind of person feels relieved about failing at the thing they wanted most? I called Denise, apologized, made up some story about my phone glitching, which, looking back, is its own kind of small betrayal, lying to cover for a part of myself I didn't understand yet. She was gracious about it. Told me to send updated notes by end of day. I hung up and just sat there in my kitchen, notes spread out in front of me, and for the first time in a long time, I actually asked myself a real question instead of a convenient one. Why do I keep doing this to myself? I didn't have an answer that day. But the question wouldn't leave. It followed me into the shower, into meetings, into the quiet 10 minutes before I fell asleep. I started paying attention to myself in a way I never had before, not judging, just watching. Like I was a stranger I was trying to figure out. And slowly, a pattern showed up. Every time I got close to something that mattered, a promotion, a good relationship, a real win, something in me would quietly step on the brakes. Not loudly. Not obviously. Just enough friction to slow things down until they stalled or fell apart, and then I'd have a perfectly reasonable explanation ready, so I never had to look at the real one. I ended up talking to a therapist about it, mostly because I didn't know who else to bring this to. I remember telling her about the missed alarms, expecting her to focus on the sleep issue. Instead, she asked me something I wasn't ready for. What did success used to cost you? I didn't understand the question at first. Then she asked me about my childhood, and something clicked that I hadn't connected in 20 years. Growing up, my father ran a small hardware store, and every time it did well, something bad seemed to follow. A good month meant he'd take on more debt to expand, and the expansion would fail, and we'd lose more than we gained. I watched that cycle happen 3 or 4 times before I turned 16. I never consciously thought, success is dangerous. But some part of me, the part that doesn't use words, apparently learned it anyway. Watched it happen enough times to write it down somewhere I couldn't see. 20 years later, I wasn't sabotaging my career. I was protecting myself from a version of loss I'd learned to expect a long time before I ever sat down at that corner desk. That idea sat heavy with me for a while. Not in a dramatic way. I didn't cry in the therapist's office or have some big cinematic breakthrough. It was quieter than that. It was more like finally understanding why a door in your house always sticks, and realizing it's not the door, it's the frame underneath it, the part you built the whole house on without ever checking. I went back to Warehouse Optimization 12 with that project folder open on my screen, and for the first time in weeks, the dread didn't disappear, but it didn't control me either. I noticed it. I named it, quietly, to myself. That's the old fear talking. And then I kept working anyway. The project finished 11 days late. Not the disaster I'd been quietly engineering for myself, and not the flawless win I used to demand of myself either. Just, late, and done, and good enough. Denise wasn't thrilled about the delay, but she also wasn't the person I'd built up in my head, someone waiting to punish me the moment I slipped. She just wanted it finished. And it was. What stayed with me wasn't the project. It was the discovery underneath it. I had spent 2 decades assuming I understood my own decisions, that I was a careful, logical person making careful, logical choices. What I actually was someone running old code I never installed on purpose, reacting to a danger that stopped being real before I even started my career. I think about my father sometimes, and I don't blame him for any of it. He was just a man trying to keep a small business alive, doing his best with what he had. But I understand now that we don't only inherit what people tell us. We inherit what we watch. What we absorb without meaning to. And most of us are walking around with some version of that, a belief we never chose, quietly steering decisions we think we're making freely. I still catch myself sometimes, hovering near the edge of something good, feeling that same old pull to step back. But now I recognize it for what it is. Not truth. Just an old habit dressed up as instinct. I wonder how many people are sitting exactly where I used to sit, capable, careful, hardworking, and quietly working against themselves without ever knowing it. I wonder how many of our biggest setbacks were never really about bad luck or bad timing at all, but about some old lesson we learned so early, we forgot we ever learned it. And I wonder what would change, for any of us, the day we finally stopped and asked ourselves the one question I avoided for 20 years. What am I actually protecting myself from?